after a long day, like a good wine, but not rosé. Like a quick fuck, and that's okay. We're three friends, we got shit to say. We're three friends doing it our way. We're two girls, one boy.
Alright. How y'all doing? Hi. What? You got something to say?
Always. Because I got a big mouth and a lot of words. That's one of my classic tisms.
Nice. There we go. Well, welcome everyone. This is the second episode of Two Girls, One Buck. My name is Yaya.
I'm Cece.
I'm Ty.
You sound so gangster.
Yeah, I felt gangster too.
I
fully did a hand sign. I fully was like, guess what? Nobody can see. But for me, it gave me that untied.
Okay.
Like, do I sell drugs? Yeah. Am I good at it? Probably not.
Fucking fantastic. Well, we appreciate you guys coming back once again to hear three people talk about different shit.
Are we hoping to start on the second episode?
Oh, if you started on the second episode, good for you. That's some gumption right there.
Yeah, everybody knows the first one's a little rough.
It's like
Still recommended.
Yes.
Go back and have a listen.
Listen for Cece then.
Fantastic. All right, so this episode is Cece.
Well, before we begin, do we want to have a little catch up about our week and what's been new? Because I'd like to talk about this week. We recently interacted with an up-and-coming company. I won't say the name just yet because they might be possible sponsors in the future.
And we don't say nothing without getting paid.
Yeah, we need those coins. We'll link them
Okay,
to our,
we're plenty of things, but stupid isn't one.
But just putting it out there, especially female-owned up-and-coming companies, we are super interested.
And the gays.
Yeah, and the gays.
And the gays.
Yeah, definitely the gays. All for the gays. And the blacks.
Mm-hmm. All of them.
All of the blacks.
And
so
the
if you're a woman
Indonesians.
that's black and gay, hit us up because
we're looking for sponsors.
If you are an Indonesian black gay woman.
Don't know about that one, but if you're that, I love you.
That would be a fun combo though, wouldn't it?
Sounds hot. Sounds real hot.
Yeah. Sounds like she got braids and big old titties.
And on that note.
Also, we created a team of operations. We now have technicians and digital artists and marketers and just people that are way smarter than us three that are
absolutely
willing to help us out. And so, look out, Donald Trump. Here we come.
Is that our competition?
Yeah, he's my competitor.
I don't know if I'm trying to move to Florida, but I will go to Mar-a-Lago. I just want to see it.
I'll party in Miami.
Any day.
We know.
I won't live there.
Any day.
Yes, love Miami. So, all right, this week's episode, I chose the topic of emotional intelligence. And I chose it because, well, for one, it's interesting to me. And secondly, I find that just because it's something I like to talk about, in talking with people, I've found that a lot of people have different interpretations of what that is. And also, obviously, various ways that it's applicable to your life and how it can be useful to, a young professional in their living their dream life.
I mean, I definitely agree because I feel like majority of the people that I meet, they can be smart as fucking shit, but the emotional intelligence is not there. That's something that I feel like you have to work towards.
Right, exactly. And so there's different levels of intelligence, obviously. So this was, well, no, I should say areas.
She said it. She said it. No takebacks. That's not how this works.
We're not
There's different levels of intelligence. Understood. On the next episode,
there are different areas of intelligence, and so emotional is one, and obviously there's like book smart and that kind of stuff. So
karate intelligence.
That is one of them as well. Yes, martial art intelligence.
I mean karate.
Drunk painting intelligence is one I possess. So I wanted to start with just kind of going around and seeing what both of you thought. Like, what was your definition and maybe how you've developed it or used it in your lives, in a positive way or whatnot?
Well, for me, emotional intelligence started at a very young age because I was verbally and emotionally abused as a kid. So I had to learn emotional intelligence because if I didn't, I would start cutting myself. So that was totally a joke.
Survival.
Yeah, that was totally a joke. I never cut myself. Tried, but I'm not that brave.
I couldn't.
But
I have perfect skin. I would never.
You couldn't bring yourself to do it.
I could. I mean, God made it. I ain't gonna break it up. That's not my job.
Fair enough.
Then why'd you get those shitty tattoos?
Bitch, I got a shitty tattoo on me. It's Ort. It's Ort. Look it up.
No, but my childhood gave me a lot of emotional intelligence. That's where I
And how did that help you, in your life in general?
Well, because I was ugly as a kid, so I had to be
same.
You're the ugly duckling syndrome.
So I was
Thank God for my 20s. Truly. I was it was not 18.
I was a nerd and a drama geek and a know-it-all, so I had
to. A nerdgen, isn't that the term?
Yeah, I was a nerdy version, a nerdgen. So I had to learn emotional intelligence from a very young age so I didn't end up bullied every day.
I'll be honest, when I was a kid, I looked like that kid that would bite you on your finger. I looked like that kid out on recess that you're like, if I get my finger too close to that kid, he's gonna bite it.
Don't provoke him. So would you look like a pit bull? What's
It's all teeth all the time. All teeth all the time.
Oh my.
What's that? You wanna come to my house for a play date?
So you had the same thing with me. You were not well-liked. You had to, learn how to be well-liked. That's my definition of emotional intelligence.
Okay.
Yeah.
So learning.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I got, because I went to school for all of this.
For emotional intelligence?
Yes, I was a sociology major, so it was all about, emotional intelligence and, interacting with people and learning how to read social cues and all of that.
Right.
So, I understand that perspective of it, and then, also an individual perspective of it from, a person who,
Can you stop doing that?
puts it into practice every day. Especially for, the jobs that I have done and I'm currently doing, it's very high in the emotional intelligence
Do you want to say
spectrum.
that industry?
Yeah, the financial industry. And,
hell yeah.
building interpersonal connections with
Sales,
people,
yeah.
and that's how you develop long-term relationships, and you have to be good at it.
I mean, I think that, that's a great kind of, segue, not to take away from what you're going to speak about, but this is the second episode, so people don't actually know what we do for a living, and why you would even bring up finance. So me and Ty, we are in the finance mortgage industry, to be specific, and to be even more specific, the sales side. So we constantly are talking to people about their homes, and not the real estate agent, just more of the loans and the finance. So you learn a lot about people, child support, alimony, back taxes, credit scores, and all those different things. And then it's even more interesting because we do it all over the phone too.
Yeah.
So that definitely.
So it's all about building that connection with somebody that you don't know, has no idea who you are.
Right.
And you got 15 seconds.
And also making sure that they're not trying to get a loan to do any terrorist shit.
Yeah, you gotta make sure you ain't doing no fraudulent deals because you would be thrown in prison.
But you're a completely different side of it.
So I'm in education,
Yeah.
which I have been for the past 4 times.
Ew, nerd alert.
Oh no.
No, she's a dweeby teacher.
Yes, I am. But obviously with any job where you're working closely with, as most jobs are working with others, but working for me with students, they're individuals and there's so many different ways to approach a learning scenario. So I think that that's something that I've thankfully, gained early on in my life and have been able to develop and use it in my industry 100% every day.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think it's one of those things that inevitably, whether you know what you're doing or not, you use it in everyday interactions.
You would hope so.
Some people do.
I mean, to different extents,
Mm-hmm.
people have different, like, further limits when it comes to everything. That's just how everything works.
I mean,
different.
like our fearless leader, I would say, was not emotionally intelligent.
No, but I don't think that's a character.
But he still ruled the big country, so I mean, sometimes, he's a really
But that's
good
not
person.
but I don't think
Is
that's
it
a big
necessary?
characteristic in, like, straight men. I don't think, well, because you don't have to be.
That is an interesting point. I mean,
But it's the truth. You don't,
I don't think
have
it's
to be.
necessarily easy
It's
to
like
find
conversations that you have with people when you realize that, like, they don't have to worry about the things that you worry about.
Give me an
know?
example.
With, like, straight white dudes, right?
Ooh, we get real specific.
I mean, but you think about it. What do you really have to worry about? Not that I have anything against it, but, like,
Sunburn.
truly, there's not much against you. Like, good for you. Jealous.
Your credit score going under
Jelly.
70.
I'm super jealous of that.
Yes.
But, like, you don't. I think that more from personal experience, from, like, my interactions with, like, straight people. Like,
Sorry,
you know.
you don't hear that in my interactions with straight people.
But you have to think about it in the context. Like, being gay is kind of cool, but it's still not super cool.
Mm-hmm.
You know? And you still have to think about things. I'm sure both of you get it from different situations. I have to be emotionally intelligent enough that where I have to be smart and driven and ambitious and gay and not threatening.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? I have to be all of these things at once, but also like just a little bit beneath you to make you feel comfortable so that I can be comfortable.
I mean, I completely understand that being
You know what I mean?
African American, you know? Like, I'm definitely making anybody feel comfortable. Like, and then subsequently enough, I end up being like the token where I kind of like lose my identity because I'm trying to submerge and be
I've gotten in fights with people about this.
Mm.
I thought it was a good friend of mine once. She invited me down to her house and I was like, great, I'll come. And I'm at her house. She's having a party. I drove quite a bit. It was like an hour and a half drive.
Wow.
Being a good friend,
Good
right?
for you.
And she's like, "Ooh, he's coming to get this pussy."
Well, no, she walked around the entire
Did she know
party
you were
introducing me to
gay?
people as her gay friend.
Oh.
And I stopped her and I was like,
That's weird.
I'm
Just
sorry,
your normal
I'm
person.
sorry, what?
Like, who do I fuck?
I was like, don't say that again because I'm not your gay friend.
Right.
I'm Thai. I am gay, but that's not my identity.
Right.
But that's the thing is that, like, for most people, they have,
It's
when it's something obscure to them, they have to put it into a box. But when that happens, it's not their problem, it's your problem. You have to adapt to their box just to make things easier on yourself.
I mean, I think we should start with what is emotional intelligence, because that is a perspective of it.
Yeah.
But I think that, like, what is emotional intelligence?
Yeah, so, great question. What I found in my research of this topic was that, I mean, I obviously thought emotional intelligence had to deal with how you both handle understanding yours and others' emotions, which is basically, what it is. But it's actually two-pronged. So everywhere that I looked, I found that it was referred to more of as emotional and social intelligence because, people can have various levels of both sides. So with emotional intelligence, it is more of like recognizing your own emotions and how you understand and react to them. So what am I feeling? Why am I feeling that way? How does feeling that way change my behavioral patterns? Like what I've seen when I'm feeling this way in the past. Maybe non-productive ways of behaving follow that as an example. And then secondly, as a social intelligence, it is being able to pick up on those social clues around other people and kind of gauging that, almost like being empathetic, right? So you're kind of picking up on what that person is feeling or experiencing and then not necessarily like mimicking or catering to it, but just more like understanding, So sometimes people might have a better understanding of their own emotions and how they behave and react to them, but have a hard time seeing that in other people because it might be different, right? So I think that just that idea of them now being defined, not together, but like in a two-category area is really interesting. Something I found out is that the theory of emotional intelligence didn't really begin being coined, quote unquote, until like the 90s, which is kind of interesting.
Makes sense.
Yeah. So there was the famous book that was written, Emotional Intelligence.
I mean, that makes sense to me because that's kind of when like the PC movement started. If you watch, like, for example, Coming to America, the new Coming to America for me was like super fucking cringy because it was like Eddie Murphy doing this horrible fucking African accent. But when it came out in the late 80s, it was brilliant, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that makes sense that in the 90s, people start getting their feelings.
Right. So in 95, Daniel Goleman wrote Emotional Intelligence, Why It Matters More Than an IQ. And then from there, he had a book series about like emotional intelligence in the workplace and in relationships and things like that. But it's actually been attributed back to Darwin in like the late 1800s because he talked about the evolutionary benefits of emotional intelligence. And he didn't necessarily use that term, but if you think about it, people are social creatures. And so being able to firstly handle your emotions and then be able to interact with others in a way that you're going to entice them to reproduce with you or whatever.
Well, from my understanding of it, emotional intelligence is more modern day, but it all kind of stems from the idea that in every situation, people wear social masks. And the difference is like how many can you have? How many situations can you change your social mask to fit in with whatever in-group that you're in so that you can like protect yourself. It is Darwinism.
That's an interesting point, Ty, because do you think it's better to have like a multitude of social masks because you are adapting to those scenarios, or is it better to like have maybe a lesser, like a handful of masks that you can, you know, in your general sense, like if I'm not at work or not with my family, then like this is the mask I use for a variety of scenarios.
Well, I think that you do it anyway. I think that the difference is like the idea is like, oh, you're very emotionally intelligent, which just means you have the wherewithal and like the capacity to understand that different situations require different social responses.
Right.
I mean,
you know what I mean?
Said it best, mask off, fucking mask off.
Yeah, which would be great.
He had the on-site to see
which will be great. But I think that everyone realizes like in different situations you have to present different self-identities that are all, I think like a lot of people think that like a social mask is a different person, but they're all just
stems
pieces. They're all just pieces of the jigsaw.
It's necessary to have that mask or you just become a sociopath, right?
Well, that's a good question.
Well, if you have too many, then you are a sociopath.
No, I consider that a psychopath.
Well, so I have a question, because this was something I also made a note of. What are some qualities you would attribute to people who have a higher emotional social intelligence? For example, one of them is confidence. People who know themselves, obviously, tend to be more confident. And then your ability to interact with others, if you are more socially aware, aka intelligent, then that tends to give you more confidence. So I was just curious what you thought might be some like qualities that are attributed to people with higher levels of that.
I would say like empathetic, but that's kind of like coined with what emotional intelligence means.
Plus, I don't think a lot of people are genuinely empathetic.
How so?
There's a lot of studies about that. Empathy is an interesting thing. Because it's frequently mixed up with sympathy.
Right.
Like, oh, that happened to you and I understand that that's a bad thing.
I understand you're sad.
Yeah, like, oh, like, I'm so sad that happened to you. But empathy is more like, I feel so bad about
I definitely agree.
You know
like, when people, like, change their profile pic to, like, a flag of a country that's going to do some shit, but then a month later they put it back to, like, their
100%. Like, I think a lot of people think that they're empathetic, but when, in all reality, they're just sympathetic. Like, oh, I understand that that's a bad thing, so I feel bad for you.
I also think being humble is a huge signal of emotional intelligence. Like if you're confident but you're not like cocky or showboaty, where it shows like that level of insecurity.
See you next Tuesday.
So for me, that like being humble, I think, because it recognizes your place in this world, and it also recognizes your impact on the others around you.
Yeah, I mean, I think that like if somebody's humble, it just like signifies to me that they are more worldly.
Yeah, emotional intelligence.
You know what I mean?
That's they're more worldly. That's to me that would be something that shows emotional intelligence, how cultured you are.
Yeah.
You can't be like
you meet a humble person and you know they've eaten plenty of shit pies. That's the truth.
Me and my pappy.
You mean somebody that's bragging about something, you're like, you have not had enough shit. Get back in line.
If they
Get
spell
back in
tortilla
line.
with all the T's.
Yeah.
Like, I
Or they
consider
say,
them to have a lot of emotional-
tortilla
Tortilla?
non-ironically. Oh,
Non-ironic?
I'm gonna have me some tortilla
Oh,
soup.
goddamn quesadilla.
That's it, Ken. Get out.
Yeah.
You are not welcome at Casa Mi Amigos anymore.
Very cool.
Do they say what is the top features of someone?
Yeah, so being more self-confident.
Super hot. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, totally awesome. Also, they tend to be more realist, so not necessarily like pessimistic or.
You guys, I think I might be emotionally intelligent. I think that I might be. I'm deducing.
Well, there's a
We
reason
are
we
all.
brought this up, Ty. This is actually intervention.
Oh no!
Dun, dun, dun.
Let me have another sip out of my canned wine.
Your box wine.
One thing that I attribute it to is a sense of patience. And I think that what goes hand in hand is also like the ability to be a good listener. So understanding that this is something that I use in my work a lot. Like I have to listen to what they're saying and then like take that in and actually respond specifically to that.
Mhm.
Whereas I think a lot of times we all inevitably fall into that situation where you just kind of like are thinking about the next thing you want to say and you're waiting for that person to stop talking and then you're kind of like, oh, and this is what I have to say.
Yeah, you're
Where,
not like an
that-
active listener.
Exactly, being an
Yeah.
active listener, exactly. So that's one thing I feel like that really is an attribute of the emotionally and socially intelligent. One thing that they said is people who are not tend to be more impulsive or hasty in their actions, not necessarily quote unquote thinking before they do things. Right. So it's
That's
this
not me.
idea of
That is not me.
being able to regulate your own emotions and then
Well, one thing, like, not to interrupt, but one thing, like, that, because you're saying that's not me. There is no perfect recipe for emotional intelligence, as
it's
in
not
any
an on or off switch.
Yeah, any like personality trait. It's ebbs and flows. There's levels to this shit, as you know. I think Future said as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. 100%.
Classic Future, the expert on emotional intelligence.
Well, so yeah, you had said that you felt like you developed that in your childhood. So,
Yeah.
Ty, when do you feel like, can you think back of a time where it's like, prior to this, I wasn't as much, and then like, this was a pivotal time in my life where...
No, I think it's pretty uniform that, like, if anybody's dealt with any significant childhood trauma, you learn to be emotionally
I
intelligent.
agree.
Oh, did all three of us deal with childhood trauma?
Oh, childhood trauma.
Hey, childhood trauma.
That's a topic for a
Cheers
to trauma.
Look at us now, Mom. Look at us now.
But I do think in general, I see kind of different levels for myself. Like I did develop in my childhood a certain sense, but also because I was a child, like a more simplistic way of understanding being emotionally intelligent and whatnot. Whereas I specifically felt like about the time I was halfway through college, at the end of my second, like quote unquote serious relationship, I felt like I did have a turning point in my just like perception of things and ability to like react or understand my perception. And I guess it's that idea of being like metacognitive, right? So you're like thinking
big
about
word.
yourself.
What's that mean?
So metacognition is like thinking about your own thoughts, basically.
Mm-hmm.
So being able to think, like, at least for me, I get into this thought pattern where I'm like, oh, well, you know, I predict a lot of things. Well, what about this and what about that? And if this happens, then what will I do? And this and this. And then I find myself getting upset about a scenario that literally hasn't happened.
Yeah,
It's
I
a
mean,
possible future event.
I think that, like, my own personal experience is being somebody who is relatively loud and kind of absurdist when it comes
That
to...
word? Absurdist?
Yeah, you just go to the
It adds
extremes.
to anything, really.
Oh.
And it's a thing.
I'm like, what?
Just adds
Two
to it.
big words.
You know, as an absurdist, I find the darkest things funny. I find the crudest things I think are hilarious. Things that are genuinely, to most people, just like, oh, no, that's like inappropriate. I think it's really funny.
I think we all are like that, but
We all are like that,
that's
but
why
I
we're
think
friends.
I think you realize at a certain point that, like, oh, okay, so, like, I have to make myself palatable. And I think it's that realization of like, hey, I have to change this portion of myself to make my life easier, which happens with childhood trauma. I have to adapt to this situation. And the only way that I can do that currently, my only defense mechanism, is to change my personality, to be more palatable.
To act one way, and you're aware of the fact.
Yes, to be like, hey, I have to act like this right now, and I'm going to have to continue to do this to protect myself.
Yeah.
Because the reality is that it's just about making yourself more palatable to other people. Because you're not harmed by your own emotional intelligence.
Which is an evolutionary thing, which I find really interesting. Because, not to cut you off, Ty, but these emotions and these thought patterns and behaviors, what I find really interesting is not something that necessarily came up. Obviously, we've adjusted in recent years, but it's not something that just popped up in the last X amount of time. I find it interesting that it's literally an evolutionary attribute. And this is a great example, this subset of we have to adjust our behavior in order to just survive in our childhood.
I don't think that much is that far off from just evolution. I mean, that's the reality. We're one step away from it because we're always trying to keep ourselves away from extinction, right?
But like, what was the turning point from being like, I don't give a fuck about how you guys are all going to feel. I'm going to like either bully you or overpower you, or like, you're going to do what I say out of fear versus like you're going to do what I say out of democracy and like friendship and kumbaya and hipsterish.
Well, I think it just depends. I think it just depends on people. I think that
we're talking about evolution. It's not necessarily just a particular person. If we're saying that emotional intelligence is needed to survive, if we're saying that Darwinism is hinting at that point,
well, it's just a social evolution. It's like with babies, like they have no sense. They have what's it called? Kids up to like 2 years old. They don't have object permanence. So like once you're out of their vision, they believe that you've disappeared.
I mean, that's how I am with men.
Absolutely.
I'm like, oh my god, where'd you go? I'm in the
world. Where are they?
He's gone forever.
If you think about it, as you develop this to understand that, right? And it's the same thing with like emotional intelligence. It's your ability to navigate through your environment with the least amount of harm to yourself.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah,
that's all that
others, right?
I don't think that you're worried about harming others. I think you're worried about putting yourself.
Inevitably, though, being social creatures, we're not, generally speaking, our intention is not to go about harming others just for the benefit of ourselves, because we're collaborative people. So the more that we can make these connections, and obviously the most basic one being like a romantic relationship, a family, okay?
I definitely get some emotional intelligence if I've done some cocaine.
And that's
because tell me about your life, girl.
That's because we live in New frickin' Mexico. Could you imagine?
That we live in New Mexico?
No.
Okay.
Hard pass.
The bottom line that I'd really like to emphasize here is that emotional intelligence is something that it's not like a stopping point, like I've reached this, It's something that you can teach it, you can cultivate it, you can grow it. And so everyone has their own different level of that, emotional and social intelligence. And just the fact like being aware of it is that step forward in being able to, at whatever point you're at, grow that and use that for your best
life
ever.
The way that I think of it is I think of it as an active skill, right? It's something that you constantly use. So the only difference is there are people that have learned how to develop it better than other people. Because it's something that you will never get rid of. You're never gonna not. You may have a different level, you may have a different upper echelon than other people, but you're never not gonna have something, and you're always gonna be using it.
So are there ways to build your emotional intelligence?
Yeah, so some general areas is, for one, being more mindful, starting with yourself. So some of the suggested ways for mindfulness is like obviously meditation, things like journaling, feeling, recognizing, like, oftentimes people get caught up in the emotion, so they get so angry about something, or they get really sad or whatnot. Not just negative emotions, but a lot of times those negative emotions lead to a thought pattern or a behavioral pattern that you can start to recognize, being aware of that.
I think that that's another aspect of it that, like, people don't really talk about a lot, is that emotional intelligence is not only about, like, how you carry yourself, but also about understanding how other people carry themselves and reacting appropriately to their response, even if it is contradictory to your own.
So it's like a belly button. It's inner and outie.
It's in and out.
Well, you have, like, other people, and they deal with things, and, like, my reaction to something is going to be different than both of your reactions to something. But I understand that your reaction is probably going to be this, and your reaction is probably going to be this. That's emotional intelligence.
So I have, like, a SoundCloud, right? Hypothetically speaking. But so let's say I have a SoundCloud, and I spent all night working on this song, and I'm so fucking pumped about it. And I want to tell you guys, and you guys give me a little bit of, like, oh, I like it. And then I keep you in my bear trap for the next 3 hours listening to garbage ass music I've made.
That's an interesting scenario.
I feel like that's like a level of, like, me, myself. Do you say it's familiar?
It feels familiar for some reason.
Oh no. Oh no.
But, like,
no.
Oh no.
You seals done. So anywho, like, I think that's a level of just, you know, like, you accepting, like, oh, I want to do this, like, making music, that's an emotional intelligence. And then also, like, because, you know, I have to bring it back to music as much as I can, but, like, also, like, being around.
Yeah, we know it's your gig.
It's my fine.
It's your gig, baby.
Get it. Fine. That and fucking, that's my fines.
I only know about the first one because I am a Christian.
Yeah, we don't talk about that in front of Ted.
No, I'm sorry.
So in short, what would you like to leave us with?
Keep it in mind. Think about it. Just consider, you know, if you find yourself in that scenario where something's getting you, you're feeling upset, you're feeling down, or you're just kind of like, wow, this has made me feel great. Just, like, start thinking about it. And I think that's really the idea, is that be aware that that's an aspect of yourself. And I think it's super cool, people who are able to see that and want to develop that and see that in others. And it's an interesting topic matter, I think. So
yeah.
I definitely appreciate it. I think it's important.
I mean, as I always say,
important.
Another Thaiism.
Oh.
Another Thaiism. If they're gonna get me, then I'm gonna get them, and they're gonna get God. And that's it. It's more
Thank you for listening.
It's more of a vendetta thing.
Please subscribe if you haven't already, and make sure that you
like us.
Leave comments at least twice a day. It's good for your health and your heart. Love you, bye.
Twice a day?
Yeah, morning and night.
I don't know how this works.
Alright, that was a recording.
Welcome to Ty's Tidbits. Okay, well, welcome to Ty's Tidbits, where we interlude from the normal episode to talk about something that I want to talk about, because now it's my turn. So this week's topic was emotional intelligence, and my subtopic for Ty's Tidbits is interpersonal relations. And I find this really interesting, because I went to college, right?
Did you?
Oh
not to brag. But, like, anybody that's listening or here in the studio understands that in college you have to take a speech class, right?
Yeah. The dreaded
right? Everybody
class.
took a speech class. Funny enough, terrified of public speaking.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I would never think that of you.
Up until recently, was not a huge public speaker. I kind of developed that as I grew older, but initially I did not like it because I never liked the sound of my voice.
And then you're like, I want to start a podcast.
When I thought, hey, people need to hear this. This beautiful Jen.
It's a beautiful voice. It's a really pretty voice.
Thank you.
It's way more.
But, like, so when I was in college, instead of taking, that's terrible.
You went to college, right? What college was this again?
This was junior college. Ain't nothing to brag about.
Was it like Carrington Online, where that guy was like, you need to go to school?
When I was taking Tri-Community Adult Education.
I went to
It was nice school. You went to school.
No, I started out in junior college just like a lot of people nowadays that aren't willing to spend $1 billion. But
I was ahead of the curve. I just got my GED.
Me too.
I'm just joking.
Oh, you bitch. I got me a dad.
You made him reveal his secrets.
Oh no! Don't look me up.
Don't tell my mom.
I have a great education.
Oh, she knows. She put me there.
Okay, anyway, so you're telling us about your interpersonal relations with school.
Well, yeah, that's when I really became introduced to it, and I think it's an interesting topic that a lot of people don't actually understand what interpersonal communication is. So I had the option between taking public speaking or interpersonal speech for my speech class, and I was like, no, I'm not going to do public speaking. No, thank you.
Scary.
So I took interpersonal speech knowing absolutely nothing about it.
What that meant?
No, I didn't know anything about it. All I knew was that, hey, I'm not going to
public.
I'm not going to have to write up a speech. I'm in.
Well, I'm going to be the dummy for people in our audience that don't know what that means. I know what inner means, I know what personal means, I know what relations mean, but it sounds like you're talking about a porno. Is this a Skinemax? What is
No, well, interpersonal relations is really a branch off from emotional intelligence, in which it is truly the study of one-on-one interactions. So it's me talking to you instead of a normal speech where it's I am speaking to an audience. It's I'm speaking to you and developing my speech based off of our interactions.
So intra is literally like one-on-one kind of thing, I believe, and then personal. So it's
is it
one-on-one
intra
with the
or
person.
inter?
It's intrapersonal, technically.
Root is intrapersonal.
Oh. See, I didn't
So
know that.
it was
Can we,
the art
look
of.
this up before we tell millions and millions.
No, this is the truth. It's the.
I'm pretty confident.
No, intrapersonal is one-on-one. So it's the art of talking with somebody else. It's the art of
interacting with another person.
Interacting and developing a conversation.
Correct.
That's truly what the whole thing was about. So the whole class was about. I know that because I was just trying to avoid public speaking.
Right.
But then the teacher was one of my favorite teachers that I've ever worked with. It's because her focus was just developing those skills. It wasn't very teacher oriented, but it was very much the
hands-on.
It was the emphasis of developing your interpersonal speech because you use it every day.
Right.
And
James, you owe me a soda.
Well, and that's something that a lot of people don't think about is that every interaction you have with people, every thought that crosses your mind, every, hey, I should say this, I shouldn't say this, I should react this way, I shouldn't react this way, is interpersonal speech.
Yeah, exactly.
Every conversation that you have with a person or in a group, basically anything more than one person is interpersonal speech. It's inundated in every aspect of your life.
Yeah, we hear you. Why is that important? Besides it being inundated in everything that we do every single time and every way we talk to people.
Or what's that?
Well, it's important because it's the development of relationships. Relationships are developed off interpersonal speech
And based
on
off
my
of
ability.
communication.
Yeah.
So if I'm a person that it's hard for me to build relationships, I'm an introvert, I don't like people, I don't want to build relationships with people, what is some things that I can do that it's not so in your face, have to learn about what your cat did or something?
It's a practice, and a lot of interpersonal speech, a lot of what you learn about from the class that I took, obviously, which is very limited, and I'm sure there's experts out there, but a lot of it is recognizing and identifying physical cues from people. Certain things, there were things that I learned from that you don't think about. If somebody's leaning back when they talk to you, it means that they're trying to create distance. If somebody's arms are crossed, it means that they're not interested in the topic that you're talking about.
Or a little guarded.
Yes, or guarded. And then they're not interested, they're not
versus
in that.
Leaning in.
Exactly, leaning in
Or
means somebody's
showing
interesting.
open space
Or
kind of thing.
opening up your body. You open up your physical body, and that's
Your
an
leg
indication that hey, I'm open to talking about this, and I'm interested and invested. You learn a lot of those things that are a huge part of interpersonal speech, and the overarching topic of emotional intelligence kind of develops from that.
I think that's super a great thing you brought up, that it's not necessarily interpersonal interpersonal speech is not necessarily all about vocal cues.
Right.
Like it could also be like physical cues.
Yeah.
It can just be like, you know,
And that's why it's
cues.
called interpersonal relations, because it's not just speech. It's also like just how you interact interpersonally. So like person to person.
Yeah, developing conversation is much more than whatever you're saying.
Is it only 7% verbal or something like that? It's like
a lot of what you understand about people is nonverbal.
Correct. Yeah.
Like an astonishing amount.
Yeah.
When you really look into it, like you get cues from. There's one that I think is super interesting. Like if you look somebody in the eyes for more than 6 seconds, it means you're interested in their opinion. If you're not talking.
like deep in thought and like looking into your pupils, I'm like.
But if you're talking to somebody, like you can tell how involved somebody is in your interaction based off if they're looking you in the eyes. Like in a lot of interactions,
touch them?
You'll notice that people will look at you.
Oh yeah, literally not like sexually, but just like how much like you're laughing and you like touch their leg versus like.
I don't know if that's involvement or comfortability. I think it's more comfortability.
I think it's both. Like you do it with strangers. Like if you're having a business conversation.
I think you do it with strangers.
Well, here's the thing. I actually don't touch people unless because that's one of my love languages. I don't touch people unless I actually.
I'm not a toucher either.
Yeah, and so if I go out of my way to
you touch absolutely anything that moves.
You're touching.
And that's your thing. But that goes back to emotional intelligence. Understanding what that means to her. But like I think for a lot of people and in general, like I'm not a toucher.
No, I'm not either.
I don't truly enjoy I don't need you to put your hand on me to like convey.
But both of you guys touch me.
Because we like you.
Because we like you and we'll allow it.
Yeah, we'll allow it.
But if a stranger
you'll be like, oh my baby. Like you touch me very
that's showing a level of intimacy that do you see him rubbing everyone's face?
I mean, come over here, baby.
The point is that like if it's someone who I'm not comfortable, in the sense comfortable just like knowing them well enough. I don't like someone just touching on me, and I don't touch on other people. If I'm like, I'm comfortable with you, I'm gonna show that by like I want to hug you. I want to be like, high five.
Like you like slapping people in bars.
That's completely irrelevant because it's like more of a sexual thing. So like, let's not go on that tangent.
Wait, what?
I'm just saying, that's what like strangers. Like I think it's like subconscious. Like when you bump someone's leg or you're comfortable enough to just.
I mean, there are things like that, but I think full on grabbing somebody's shoulder and telling them a story is a different gig.
Right.
Like you being able to read somebody, like I can talk to somebody at a bar and understand if they're interested in like talking to me or if they want nothing to do with me. 100%. And if they want nothing to do with me, I'm out.
And you're not going to touch them.
Well, because I love talking to strangers.
Why?
I just find, you hang out with the people that you know and you get to know them so well that like it's not as interesting to go out with them. Like I already know all your bullshit.
Oh, man.
I'm trying to meet like during the COVID pandemic, Pandademi Lovato, Pandorama, all of that, the whole gig. The one thing I miss more than anything is I truly just loved meeting a stranger and becoming best friends for a night.
That's
and never meeting him, never talking to him.
The opposite. Like I have no interest in like wanting to talk to people on that type of level.
Completely the opposite. I think you think you're.
You just get you. Okay, so this past weekend I was recording for my first music video, and so last weekend at my first music video shooting, and Cece was there helping me as my stylist and like emotional support animal. And
whoa.
What? Hold on now. Hold on. Okay, start
hard
over.
stop. Maybe correct.
Stylist,
best friend,
assistant,
homie,
newbie drummer.
Yeah, exactly. And you kept bringing
Roadie.
the story how I had personally asked someone about themselves, and as soon as they start talking, I walked away.
Well, I brought it up simply because it was a person who was there like through the entire weekend, and it was just funny because I was around the amount of times that you asked this person the same question.
And that's what I'm saying. Like talking wise, like I can care, like I can give a fuck. But like I'm very.
I think that's more memory.
But no, like I mean, just like
what this story surmises is that like at one point she had already asked the same question multiple times, and she, you know, like we're all standing in this area, and she asked the question again, and the person started explaining the same thing again, and within seconds she turned around and walked away. And he was making eye contact with her. I was watching it. I was like, okay.
That's my baby.
And then the person basically was like, and then looked at me, and I was the only one like paying attention, so then reiterated the same story. So now I know a lot about this person's life, inevitably, because you've asked the same question, and I just happen to be standing next to you, I'm the one listening.
But I think the reason I brought that up was just that, like, for me, you were saying that, you know, if I like look them in their eyes, paying attention, and like those type of physical cues, like being present. For me, that doesn't necessarily show that if I care about you.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, me and Cece, we live with each other, and most of the time we're constantly
Sexually.
Mm-hmm. We're scissor sisters.
No, we're not.
Every day.
No, we're not.
Check them out on OnlyFans.
No, I mean, yes, but no.
Scissor sisters.
Scissor sisters.
69 or 20.
For $20.96.
Yeah, please show your support.
Yeah. Donate to their Patreon. They gotta GoFundMe.
You won't be disappointed.
Okay, so I think we should stop at this point because